Alright, what we did and learned kind of today and yesterday. So there was this paper on fasting mimicking diet. And here's kind of a few screenshots, and you can see in each of these screenshots there's some verbiage on the y-axis. So we just asked from that study, yes, we get some went up, some went down. What actually is good for IBD, IBS, any digestive disorders? And here it is. And this is usually. So here, these are the strains of bacteria, and you can see which ones had which. Surprisingly, this went super high with the fasting mimicking diet, and we asked about that. We'll get back up there, but it's often harmful, but maybe in this context, because if you look, see, it went through the roof with this FMD after it was hit with DSS with dextrin. It's like something to replicate IBD pretty much. And in this case, it could be having an inflammatory healing effect, because if you look at the screenshots from the first extract, the cool thing is it did yield regeneration at a higher scale for both the small intestine and the colon as just dextran, so DSS, and as well as the DSS water fast. So it was super rejuvenative, and you're like, why does it have a bad bacteria? Well, maybe it was just an inflammatory bacteria to help with that rejuvenation. So in most contexts it's bad, not in this one. And you can see here immune cell markers, these were down, which is good because these are typically bad when elevated. And then BRDU, which is for the epithelial cells in the colon, as well as these regenerative were good and they were up. So fasting mimicking diet, pretty awesome, right? Especially compared to water fast. So in here you can see these two were higher. So looks good, and it gives a breakdown of what's most important, and all of these, which these were up. Interestingly enough, and I think it's worth pointing out, everybody touts like Akkermansia is the best. Akkermansia, first off, is here, so it could be mixed. So in most contexts it's good, but it could be mixed here. When you don't eat for a long time with IBD, you notice because you start getting a lot of symptoms. And not sure Akkermansia is all good, especially when it starts to take over. And I know lactospira and ruminococci are usually good. Nothing's good in like a very, inordinate amount, like, and there's no comparison, that would be bad. These guys are usually good, but fasting mimicking diet actually takes these guys out, and really any fasting. So fasting good to be used maybe as a stressor here and there to level the playing field. So it is good. A fasting mimicking diet is probably the best, but again, use 1 to 3 days at the most is how, and we'll get to the autophagy numbers here. So yeah, that's all of that. So yes, if you have less inflammation, it's actually easier to have even less inflammation. Whereas if your inflammation, it's kind of like putting the brakes on a car that's already slow. It's easier. If a car's going 200 miles per hour, you can't easily put the brakes. There's damage, there's heat, there's from the friction, there's it's not a situation that you can easily put any brakes on there as well. So, and here's some numbers. So like if you have RA, arthritis is actually, if your CRP is near normal, you have a pretty good chance, up to 80% of putting it into remission. And then here, when your fecal calprotectin drops below 100, so it's approaching normal. Is like if you're in the 10s, 20s, that's extremely good. Even under 100, you get down to 80% drop in risk flare, which is fantastic. And here, losing visceral fat can actually cause that drop, so that's awesome. As well as trying to normalize cortisol by using breathing techniques, etc. So anything that calms your central nervous system and puts you in a parasympathetic state will issue a drop in CRP, which will then issue a greater drop over time. So if you're like, oh man, I'm at my worst, it can only get better quite literally from a multiplicative, even an exponential standpoint if you plot it out. So, yeah. So, and here's when it's most true, which a lot of these overlap because you'll have like Crohn's, you'll have MS. Psoriasis is usually brought on, and they're all IL-17. I think there was something, they're all 17, 23, 23A. Some of those interleukin, they're all related. So if you have one, it's pretty much you fall into this, and you may have signs of another. But the good news is there's a positive spin on it. It can be definitely taken down significantly. And then why? Well, there's also, so like here, 3 to 5 days, you have your M1, which is bad, let's say, go down 30-40%, M2 goes up 40-70%. And these are macrophages as well as your CRP half-life isn't that long. So in about 5 days, which lines up 4 to 5 days, usually take the half-life, multiply it by 5, and then it's out of your system around 95% or higher. And you can see it's right around 4 to 5 days. So these all correlate, and if you can make it past 4 days, that's usually why microbiome resets in full 4 days are usually the worst. If you can make it past that, what is that, 96 hour, you're golden. So yeah, that's good. There's some 3-day fasting, and you see a lot more drop in TNF, and we'll get to how this correlates with autophagy, because autophagy actually rises to 100-200%, and that's kind of its cap at 3 days. Ketones rise like 4,000% from baseline at day 3. So, can we get there now? Let's see. Yeah, here. So this is caloric restriction and how it impacts it. So even a slight caloric restriction will increase ketones in autophagy. If you do fasting mimicking diet, you're closer to 70%, which is 1,070% here autophagy increase. And then if you go full water fast, again, there are trade-offs, and that's why the fasting mimicking diet is at least shown in studies to be better. But so yeah, that's kind of, and this is at 24 hours. So if you keep going and plot it out for day 3, now you have a crazy up there, close to 6,000% ketone production, and then you have 200% autophagy at the high ends. That's a lot. And that's why fasting mimicking diet, especially even if you can do it for a day or 2, it's huge. If you can carry it on to 3 days, you're going to get at least, from what it showed, 60 to 70% of the benefits here, which are usually enough to reverse. And again, it's about kind of reversing the second gradient. So you have like distance, velocity, and acceleration. You want to take that acceleration and turn it around, because if you turn that around, you're golden. So, for inflammation, and let's see. I think we were up here. These are just some acronyms. Again, this is good for you, bottom line. It helps with the T-reg promotion, and then these are from, interestingly, EPA, DHA, like from algae, and less preferred fish, but algae mainly. And they also stop immune response if it's going out of control. So that's pretty cool. and they can go, yeah, you can see here. I mean, there's a strong tumor necrosis factor alpha drop of 50% with the resultant. So that's why a lot of people tout fish oil. Again, I'm totally against fish, algae oil, getting it from algae, and just eating sea plants in general. And also flax and walnuts. And you actually, if you eat a lot of flax, and that's like your main food source, and along with other healthy like walnuts, you actually produce quite a bit of EPA, DHA. Even though the ratios are low, the actual amounts are close to there's 1,000 is where you want to be per day units, and it gets pretty close. I think it's between 600, 800 units. So, which is how we evolved on land. Okay. Cool. So here's what you would normally eat, which again is pretty much the keto diet we've been following, just less food and less, especially less nuts, because nuts and seeds have the protein, whereas an avocado doesn't. So less overall protein, and it's critical because as mTOR comes down, do we have it? Not here, but as mTOR comes down, that's when autophagy rises. So if mTOR's high, you're not going to get the same, nearly the same level as autophagy, because they're inversely related. Okay. So eating less does, they have less to eat. Not by this crazy 45-fold reduction. I think there's a lot more going on in that study, like the DSS-induced, and then having FMD for 5 days, that will probably lower that microbial load, that 45x drop we saw from lactobacilli. And here we see how FMD does suppress mTOR and stimulate autophagy, which is cool. And there is some bile acid shifts, it's more concentrated, so it takes out a lot of microbes that might not be as resistant to bile acid, which is typically a good thing for those with digestive disorders. So. Okay, so what's allowed on a fast? Pretty much water, tea, coffee, some light coffee. Some people say no coffee, but and then ACV is allowed. What you don't want to do is you don't want to intake anything that has protein, carbs, not protein. I think even 0.5 to 1 gram of protein can cause a break, so to speak. For ketosis, most of that doesn't matter. You need at least 10 grams of protein or 15 grams of protein around, and then you need 5 grams to 10 grams of carbs to break ketosis. So most of these things won't break ketosis. These are usually not allowed on a strict fast, but especially not these, at least from country, you definitely do not want to. And gut microbiome experts, you want to stay away from these. Bone broth sort of helps. MCT oil is good if you can handle it, and usually, from my perspective, it's whole, natural, plant-based food, so this would be out. Whereas coconut, once you break the fast, you can have coconut, like fermented coconuts, like coconut yogurt, or just coconuts. That will have plenty of medium-chain triglycerides in there. Okay, so yeah, these are obviously not allowed. Here's a nice breakdown. And then here's kind of what we talked about already, and here's I like the summary tables, are pretty cool. Yeah, and we already talked about that. So probiotics are important to be taken throughout the day. So, and I find it best if you can get it 5 or 6 times, even if it's small, like ACD, closer to night, dilute it in water because it burns your esophagus, and there is esophageal cancer linked if you do it for a prolonged time. So, but you definitely want to spread out. All in one go is a bad bet for several reasons. But even if it's with a meal and you're protecting your microbes through the food as a barrier from the acids in your stomach, it's not ideal all in one, because that meal could have different substrates that other bacteria like, and you're just by focusing on that one meal. Let's say meal 2 has meal 1 bacteria's favorite substrate. Meal 1 bacteria miss out. Not entirely, but they do, especially as it's going down, and there is a lot when the meal happens. So also it sends a inflammatory signal, pretty much an anti-inflammatory signal every time you ingest fermented foods, and you want that signal going off every few hours to make sure you cover it fully. And again, as long as you're doing ACV, and we'll get to, actually, can we get to that now? Yeah. So here's what, in terms of which ferments you can actually do that break fast. Most of these, very small, and this is a tablespoon, so if you take a teaspoon of miso, you're not going to break fast. And you're definitely, almost all of these are no breaking ketosis. Except if it's like super sugar laden, like sourdough bread or kombucha with added sugar, you might, some of these you might. But most of them, you're definitely not breaking ketosis. And for a fast, you want to look at the protein on a lot of these for the animal ones. And again, I don't prefer animal ones for, if you don't have an option, you can, but a lot of times the plant-based is much safer for autoimmune patients than going with dairy or other animal ferments, and especially for long-term health. But if you go, you just gotta look at the protein mainly to see if it breaks fast. But again, to summarize, most of these, and it's awesome because if you take sauerkraut, even a full tablespoon, you're not going to break the fast. If you take ACV, you're not going to break the fast. Even kombucha at low doses, and if it doesn't have a lot of sugar, you're not going to break the fast. So, like, you can take this throughout the day and not break a fast and not break ketosis, which is awesome. Okay, going back, what is this? Oh yeah, we'll get that. And it is shown to be a little more effective. I can tell you this is a low number. It's probably much more effective. Because if you're, like, for instance, having a reaction to a food and you take it, and this has happened to me a lot over the years, like middle of the night, some A isn't going. This was back when I had my microbiome was not as great. It would save me. Like, it would let me go to sleep. Just even that tablespoon of sauerkraut. So, water only fasting, and this is even, so fasting mimicking diet is even less than this. So if people are like, oh, you're going to lose muscle, what it comes down to is, here's your body weight, here's the actual lean that's lost, but the lean includes glycogen and water. So what it comes down to is, you really only lose about 25% of this 0.3 to 0.6 kilograms, so that's at 0.1, 0.2 kilograms around, of muscle per day. And usually there is a growth hormone increase of like 2,000%, depending on how long the fast is. So you get it back. So yes, it can fall, but it reverses extremely quickly on the refeed, and you can see the graphs. You get most of it back, if not more. So again, as long as you have the refeed, and the refeed is healthy, controlled, good proteins, healthy protein plants, etc., you will gain back that lost muscle. And there's like kind of a memory, no pun, but like muscle memory, quite literally, because the body does not like to lose what it had, especially in the short term. If it's chronic, that's different, but in the short term, a 3-day fast is not going to do anything, especially a 1-day fast if that's something you're trying on the fasting mimicking diet. If you're getting hunger, let's say you're full-time work and you're getting hunger, apparently the best fixes are electrolytes. It says condensing meal. I would still have 3 meals. You up fats, down proteins, because protein would break the fast because of mTOR. You don't want that. And then again, strategic insertion of tea, but mostly it's going to be sodium and electrolytes. And doing the fasting mimicking diet is going to help buffer that, because you're going to get magnesium, potassium from foods, which is super important. And then finally, if you have to, you can up the calorie count, but most of the time, especially if you do 2 to 3 weeks of ketosis, so some ketogenic diet, you're going to become keto adapted, then you can go on 700 calories and not fall flat on your face, which is awesome. So maybe doing that first and then starting to do a fasting mimicking diet, and you should get most of the benefits from ketosis, and then you take it to the next level with a fasting mimicking diet. So, yep, and this is how long it takes you. Usually it's 2 weeks to 3 weeks before most people feel functionally adapted, which is what you want to aim for, because it's can you work. Last thing, there is so if everything's fine and then you cough or you laugh or you talk and then all of a sudden you start getting some crazy nausea or burping, that means your vagus nerve was very sensitive, and at that point in time, you cross that threshold with whatever, and here there's several things that can happen to cross that threshold. But usually it's some vibration, something, especially air and exchange, and that, if it causes kind of your vagus nerve to go off the hook or out of control, you want to take in a deep breath, and then a second, and then deep breath out all the way to where you have nothing in your lungs, as well as, if you can, in tandem, do a progressive muscle relaxation. So just relax everything. So, and keep it going. And when you do that, you will notice that usually it takes at least 3 to 4 reps of that to notice a significant drop in reactivity, and it might undo it. So you might go back to, oh, I feel normal. And one thing that happened, and I post, let's see if I have it here. Okay, so this is there was nothing really too crazy in the videos, except this video, he only ate fermented foods for like 7 days, and he had a 29-second poop that just came out, no wipe, felt like butter. It was fantastic, and I believe him. There's a lot of other people reporting that with a lot of fermented foods. One word of caution: if you use this Koso, it's like per tablespoon it has 9.3 grams of sugar, which is insane. Compared to almost everything else on the keto diet we've been following, that's like easily probably 1/3 of the total allotted net carb. Like you should not be consuming this. You can ferment hundreds of different fruits and veggies in your kitchen if you. I mean, we'll cover a whole foods buy here, but you do not want to ingest a lot of stuff. That's 1 tablespoon is 9.3 grams. I'm covering some things here. So I'll just jump around, but usually ferments, they actually help you learn things. That's been shown in studies that through inflammation, modulation of the HPA axis, you actually learn better. But it's not like that. At least in my experience, they teach you things that you wouldn't otherwise know. And this comes down to, I know a lot of microbes, they figured it out DNA-wise. They replicate much faster than we do on scales of seconds. Generation to generation, they're like, I don't know, it's like doubling. It's like exponential growth within minutes. We're talking, not even hours. And so that, when they figure something out, their DNA changes, they tell the others through transfer of DNA. So they transfer it. And the awesome thing is the others learn, so they kind of transform. If they figure it out, you take it in, it actually transfers not only to your other microbes in your cells, but it's shown to have an epigenetic effect on your cells themselves. So they teach you bottom line. And it's important to eat ferments first, so you want to front load the meal, not all at the same time, but like cooked green, so you want to like sauerkraut, cooked greens, kimchi, cooked greens, fermented beets, real beets. You kind of want to structure it like that to still do what Glucose Goddess said, but you definitely want to front loading. And you'll find if you eat a lot of ferments, you'll just, I don't know, they're telling you, or whatever might happen is you just want to front load. It just feels the best, so to speak. This is when okay, so kind of last night we did 3 like chugs or mouthfuls of ACV after the last meal. We were kind of on the line of reacting, and then we went to no reaction whatsoever from a food. And it followed because this morning we felt really good, probably the lightest we felt in one of the least gas episodes. There was no episode, it's like the least gas in general, so it was awesome. And that probably was due to the ACV, and less because we enjoyed our food, which might play a part, and keto adaptation might, but mainly that. And one thing I noticed is after the relaxed gut, which we covered on another, and then the long exhale out, if we did that 3 times outside, it triggered like this, almost like an oscillation, where you can taste and smell much better than if you just focus on taste and smell. For those of you who lost your taste and smell, and you're like, oh, eating fermented foods and then doing like relax, like these 2 things to relax and bring down, so pretty much put you in parasympathetic overdrive, that thing appears. And I don't know, I call it 4 dragon because that's what it looks like, and it's kind of like just an oscillation, but it helps so much. And then you can press on it, and even going into reality more and enjoying this world, you really become like really, I guess, press and amplify that dragon. Fermented foods also do that a lot. And if that dragon is going, you actually have less reactivity of foods. You finish meals super quick. Like it's almost like food becomes amazing. And you can also, if you kind of muscle grid flex your vagus, it's different than the dragon. It will, for normal foods, it'll just taste, and in my experience, go left, and then for fermented foods, you actually shoot out like further the dragon forward, and then right. And yeah, and kind of the dragon's ongoing, even if you talk. So I used to get, it kind of, I think it keeps the HPA axis doing the best job. Like it just works, is the easiest way. Yeah, so here's some other thing is it makes you you get a very light feeling, like your pant size becomes too large for you now, which is cool. It's like a very light feeling. And then also here you did a meta-analysis on all the diary. Like you can see the scoreboard is pretty small, 60 pages. So we looked through like Control F and found that usually when this dragon appears, it's appeared 3 times. It's usually when you're doing your best, and when things are turning for the good. It seems like, and it usually the factors were fasting, taking some sort of like eating some sort of algae and a large variety of fermented products. And the problem is this, because there were times where fasting wasn't as strict. There were times where different types of algae, different quantities, sometimes very little, like now, very little kelp. But it's always been this large fermented food. So hopefully that helps you get kind of this feeling if you lost it, because it is amazing and it lets you just live life and feel awesome. So, yeah, and the last thing, I do want to show you what I'm ordering, just to show you what I typically eat. So everything you see is going to be pressure steamed at 0 minutes with 2 cups of water, and then 0 minutes steamed in like an Instant Pot 8 quart. Unless it's fermented or olives, pretty much. So all of these guys, these are ferments, so they won't. But all of those guys, again, ferment, olives, ferment. Oh, and flax is going to be for 5 minutes after you add water to mix. And these are 2 ferments, olives, and then these are all ferments. But you can see it's mostly cooked greens, cooked radishes. I mean, the ferments, we order 1 of each to get maximum variety. And that has worked out very, very well. So, hopefully this helps you.